Millionaire called his wife Barren and divorced her. 7 years later, he invited her to his new wife's baby shower to humiliate her, but she arrived with triplets. What happened next will leave you in tears, and one dark secret about his new baby will shock the world. Don't skip this, my beautiful family. Let's begin a love story you will never forget. Some invitations arrive like whispers, others like thunder. This one landed on Letitia Wright's mahogany desk with the force of a lightning strike, its cream-colored elegance mocking 7 years of carefully constructed peace. The envelope bore her maiden name in flowing script, as if the past 4 years of marriage to Tom Peter Hanks had been erased with deliberate cruelty. Inside, embossed gold letters announced what should have been impossible. Sergey and Belinda Ballmer cordially invite you to celebrate the upcoming arrival of their first child. Letitia's hands trembled as she read the words again, each letter a knife twist in wounds she thought had healed. Her ex-husband, the man who had destroyed her with accusations of being broken and barren, was finally getting his precious legacy. The irony tasted like bitter medicine on her tongue. "Mama, why are you crying?" 3-year-old Ava appeared in the doorway of Letitia's home design studio, her dark eyes wide with concern. Behind her, Nani and Naomi peered around the corner, their identical faces reflecting the same worry. Letitia quickly wiped her cheeks, forcing a smile for her daughters. "Just some dust in my eyes, sweetheart." "Come here, all of you." The triplets rushed to her, their small arms wrapping around her waist in a cocoon of unconditional love. Ava, the boldest of the three, studied the invitation with a frown. "Who's Sergey Ballmer?" "Someone who used to know Mama a long time ago," Letitia replied carefully, her fingers instinctively stroking Nani's soft curls. The gentle child always seemed to sense when emotions ran deep, her small hand finding Letitia's free one and squeezing tight. Naomi, ever the mischievous one, grabbed the invitation and held it up to the light. "Why does he want you to come to his party?" Before Letitia could answer, footsteps echoed in the hallway. Tom Peter Hanks appeared, his tie loosened after a long day at the architectural firm, his warm brown eyes immediately finding hers across the room. Even after 4 years of marriage, her heart still skipped when he looked at her like that, as if she were the most precious thing in his world. "What's all this about?" he asked, his gaze shifting to the invitation in Naomi's small hands. As he read, Letitia watched his expression change from curiosity to concern, to something harder, more protective. "Tom," she began, but he held up a hand, his jaw tightening as he finished reading. 7 years, he said quietly, his voice carrying a weight that made the triplets look between their parents with growing unease. 7 years of silence. And now this. Letitia stood, gathering her daughters close. "Girls, why don't you go play in the garden? Daddy and I need to talk." Ava, always the leader, took her sister's hands. "Come on, but we want cookies after dinner," she declared, her small chin lifted with determination that reminded Letitia painfully of herself at that age. "All the cookies you want," Tom promised, ruffling Ava's hair as the girls filed out. Once they were alone, he turned to Letitia, his expression soft but troubled. "Talk to me." "He invited me to his baby shower," she said, the words feeling foreign on her tongue. "After everything he said, everything he did to me, he has the audacity to rub it in your face," Tom finished, moving closer. His hands found her shoulders, strong and steady. "He wants you to see what he thinks you couldn't give him." Letitia leaned into his touch, drawing strength from his presence. Tom Peter Hanks had been her salvation in ways he would never fully understand. When grief and loss had nearly destroyed her, he had been the gentle harbor where she could finally rest. Their love had been slow to bloom, built on friendship and mutual healing rather than passion and promises. But it had grown into something unshakable, something real. "There's something I need to tell you," she whispered against his chest, breathing in the familiar scent of his cologne. "Something about the girls, about Sergei, about why this invitation terrifies me." Tom pulled back, his hands moving to cup her face. "Whatever it is, we'll handle it together." "That's what we do," she almost told him then. Almost pulled out the medical report hidden in her desk drawer, the one that would change everything. But fear held her tongue, fear of what the truth might cost them, fear of the battle that would surely follow. Instead, she made a decision that would either be the bravest or most foolish thing she had ever done. "We're going to that baby shower." Tom's eyebrows shot up. "We're what?" "I'm going," she clarified, her voice growing stronger with each word. "And I'm taking the girls." It's time Sergei Bolmer met his replacement and saw exactly what real love looks like. "Letitia, are you sure about this? The girls don't need to be subjected to the truth," she interrupted. "They're going to ask questions someday about their father, about why I was so broken when you found me. Maybe it's time they saw the difference between a man who destroys and a man who builds." Tom was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. "This isn't just about showing him the girls, is it?" She couldn't meet his eyes. "I don't know what you mean." "You're planning something. I can see it in your face, the same look you get when you're redesigning a space. You see the end result, but I'm not sure I want to know how you plan to get there." "Trust me," she whispered, rising on her toes to kiss him softly. "Just trust me." He kissed her back, pouring 4 years of unwavering devotion into the gentle touch of his lips. "Always," he murmured against her mouth. "But Letitia, promise me something. Whatever happens at this baby shower, whatever you're planning, we come home together. All of us." "We will," she promised, even as guilt twisted in her stomach. She was about to unleash a truth that would shatter more than just Sergei's perfect new life. It might destroy everything she had built with Tom, everything beautiful and safe they had created together. But as she watched him kneel down to help Naomi with her shoes through the window, his patience infinite as their daughter chattered about her day, Letitia knew she had no choice. The truth had been patient long enough. That night, after the girls were asleep and Tom was in the shower, she pulled out her phone and dialed a number she had memorized but never called. "Bolmer Residence," a crisp voice answered. "This is Letitia Wright. Please tell Sergei I received his invitation." She paused, watching Tom's silhouette move behind the frosted glass of their bathroom door. "And tell him I'll be bringing my daughters. All 3 of them." She hung up before the person could respond, her heart hammering against her ribs. In 3 days, she would walk into Sergei Bolmer's perfect world and detonate the lie it was built on. But first, she had to decide if her marriage to Tom Peter Hanks was strong enough to survive the explosion. Chapter 2. The Love That Saved Her. During her marriage to Sergei, Letitia Wright had believed love was supposed to hurt. She had believed that jealousy was passion, that control was care, that a man who demanded perfection loved you enough to make you perfect. Sergei Bolmer had taught her these lies with the patience of a master craftsman, shaping her into something beautiful and broken. 5 years ago, 2 years after her devastating divorce, she found herself in a grief counseling center that smelled like vanilla candles and false hope. She had believed that jealousy was passion, that control was care, that a man who demanded perfection loved you enough to make you perfect. Sergei Bolmer had taught her these lies with the patience of a master craftsman, shaping her into something beautiful and broken. The grief counseling center smelled like vanilla candles and false hope. Letitia sat in the circle of mismatched chairs, staring at her hands as strangers shared their losses. She had been coming for 3 months, ever since the divorce papers were finalized, and she still hadn't spoken a word. "Letitia?" Dr. Martinez's gentle voice cut through her reverie. "Would you like to share today?" She shook her head, the same response she gave every week. What was there to say? That her husband had convinced her she was defective, that she had believed him so completely she couldn't imagine anyone ever loving her again. "I lost my wife," a quiet voice said from across the circle. Letitia looked up to see a man with kind brown eyes and work-worn hands. "Cancer. 2 years ago yesterday. Tom Peter Hanks didn't look like the kind of man who belonged in a place like this. He was too solid, too present, too unbroken." But as he spoke about Sarah, about how they had planned to have children someday, about how empty their house felt without her laughter, Letitia heard something she recognized, the sound of a person trying to learn how to breathe again. "We were together for 8 years, he continued, his voice steady despite the pain flickering in his eyes. "She made me believe in forever. Now I don't know what to believe in." After the session, Letitia found herself walking beside him in the parking lot. "I'm sorry about your wife," she said quietly, surprising herself by speaking. He stopped, turning to look at her with those impossibly gentle eyes. "Thank you. I'm sorry about whatever brought you here. My marriage," she found herself saying. "My ex-husband said I was broken. Turns out he was right." Tom was quiet for a moment, then, "You know what I learned from watching Sarah fight cancer for 3 years? Broken doesn't mean worthless. Sometimes broken things heal stronger than they were before." It was the first time in months that someone had looked at her without pity, without judgment, without the assumption that she needed fixing. Tom Peter Hanks saw her brokenness and didn't run. He saw her pain and didn't try to heal it. He simply stood there in the parking lot and let her exist exactly as she was. "Would you like to get coffee?" he asked. "Not a date," he added quickly. "Just 2 broken people who could probably use a friend." That coffee turned into weekly walks. The walks turned into long phone conversations. The conversations turned into quiet dinners where they talked about everything except love and forever and the futures they had lost. Tom never pushed, never demanded, never tried to fill the spaces that Sergei had carved out of her soul. Instead, he showed her what gentleness looked like. He demonstrated patience without keeping score. He offered support without expecting gratitude. Slowly, carefully, he helped her remember who she had been before Sergei convinced her she was nothing. "I want to try fertility treatments," she told him one evening, 18 months after that first coffee. They were sitting on his back porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of hope. Tom was quiet for a long moment. "With me? If you want to. I know it's not what you planned. I know I'm not Sarah. I know—" "Letitia," he interrupted gently, taking her hand. "I stopped planning my life the day Sarah died. Everything since then has been a gift I didn't expect. If you want to try to have children, I'm here for whatever happens. What if I really am broken? What if Sergei was right and I can't? Then we'll love each other through that too." His thumb traced across her knuckles, a touch so tender it made her chest ache. "But Letitia, you're not broken. You're healing. There's a difference." The fertility treatments were harder than either of them had expected. Months of hope followed by disappointment, of procedures and medications, and the slow erosion of optimism. But through it all, Tom never wavered. He held her through the failures, celebrated the small victories, and loved her through every moment of it. When Dr. Peterson called with the news that she was pregnant, not just pregnant, but carrying triplets, Letitia cried so hard she couldn't speak. Tom cried too, his arms around her as they absorbed the magnitude of what was happening. 3, he whispered against her hair. 3 babies. "Are you scared?" she asked. "Terrified," he admitted, but the good kind of terrified. The kind that means something amazing is about to happen. Their wedding was small, held in the garden behind Tom's house, with only a handful of friends as witnesses. Letitia wore a simple blue dress that accommodated her growing belly, and Tom cried when he saw her walking toward him through the roses Sarah had planted years before. "I love you," he whispered, as they exchanged vows they had written themselves. "Not because you're carrying my children, not because you need me, but because you're you. Brave and beautiful and stronger than you know." When Ava was born first, tiny and fierce, Tom was the one who cut the umbilical cord with shaking hands. Nani followed 10 minutes later, quiet and observant, even in her first moments. Naomi came last, as if she had been waiting for her sisters to test the waters first. "Daddy," Ava had said, one of her first words, reaching for Tom with chubby arms. He had sobbed like a child, this man who had never expected to hear that word again. Now, watching him help the girls with their shoes for the baby shower, Letitia marveled at how completely he had embraced fatherhood, not as a replacement for what he had lost with Sarah, but as something entirely new and precious. "Mama, is Daddy coming with us to the party?" Nani asked, her small face serious as always. "Of course I'm coming," Tom said, tickling her until she giggled. "I go where my girls go." Letitia's heart clenched. In 3 hours, they would walk into Sergei's world, and she would have to choose between protecting the man who had saved her and revealing the truth that could save them all. "Tom," she said quietly as he finished with Naomi's shoes, "when we get there, whatever happens, I need you to remember that I love you. All of you. More than I ever thought possible." He looked up at her, those kind brown eyes filled with concern. "You're scaring me a little." "Good," she whispered, kissing the top of his head. "That means you understand how much this matters." Chapter 3. The Gilded Prison. Power, Sergei Bolmer had learned, was the most seductive prison ever constructed. From his corner office on the 42nd floor, he could see the entire city spread beneath him like a map of conquered territory. Every building, every street, every life below represented something he owned, influenced or controlled. Yet, as he stared at the private investigator's photos scattered across his mahogany desk, he felt like the smallest man in the world. Letitia's face smiled up at him from glossy prints, her transformation so complete it made his chest ache. Gone was the uncertain woman he had molded and manipulated, replaced by someone radiant with confidence. In every photo, she was surrounded by 3 identical girls with dark hair and bright eyes, their small hands reaching for her with the kind of trust he had never inspired in anyone. "She looks happy," he murmured to himself, picking up a photo of Letitia laughing as her daughters played in what appeared to be their backyard. A man stood beside her, tall, steady-looking, with the kind of face that suggested reliability over excitement. Tom Peter Hanks, the investigator's report had noted. Architect, widower, married to Letitia for 4 years. Sergei had expected to feel vindicated seeing these photos, proof that his ex-wife had moved on to someone safe and ordinary. Instead, he felt hollow, as if someone had scooped out his chest and left only the echo of what used to be there. "Admiring your replacement?" Belinda Ashworth swept into his office without knocking, her designer heels clicking against the marble floor with military precision. Even 7 months pregnant, she moved like a predator, her beauty sharp enough to cut. She was everything society expected of a billionaire's wife, blonde, accomplished, connected to all the right families. She was also calculating enough to make Sergei look naive. "I sent her an invitation," Sergei said, not bothering to hide the photos. Their marriage had moved beyond pretense months ago. Belinda's laugh was like crystal breaking. "How deliciously cruel of you. Invite the Barren ex-wife to celebrate your virility. I assume this is some sort of closure ritual?" "Something like that." Sergei leaned back in his chair, studying his wife's face. "She's bringing the children." "What children?" Belinda moved closer, her eyes scanning the photos. When she saw them clearly, her face went perfectly still. Those are her children? Triplets, 3 years old. Sergei watched his wife's reaction carefully. Beautiful, aren't they? Belinda snatched up one of the photos, her manicured fingers gripping it so tightly the edges crumpled. In the image, little Naomi was looking directly at the camera, her face tilted at an angle that was achingly familiar. When exactly did she have these children? Belinda's voice was carefully controlled, but Sergei caught the tremor underneath. According to the report, they were born about 6 months after our divorce was finalized. That's impossible. Belinda's hand moved protectively to her own belly. You said she was barren. You said that's why you divorced her. Sergei stood slowly, walking to the window that overlooked the city he had conquered, but could never truly possess. I said many things during our divorce. Not all of them were entirely accurate. What do you mean by that? He turned to face her, noting how the afternoon light revealed the fine lines around her eyes that makeup usually concealed. Belinda Ashworth was beautiful, but it was the kind of beauty that required constant maintenance, constant vigilance against time and gravity and truth. I mean that perhaps I was too quick to assign blame for our inability to conceive. The words tasted like ash in his mouth. Perhaps I was so desperate to avoid looking weak that I destroyed the only person who ever loved me unconditionally. Belinda's laugh was harsh. Don't be ridiculous. If you had fertility issues, your doctors would have caught them during the prenatal testing for this pregnancy. What prenatal testing? Sergei asked quietly. The question hung in the air between them like a blade. Belinda's face cycled through several expressions, surprise, guilt, calculation, before settling on defiance. The routine tests, blood work, genetic screening. She waved her hand dismissively. You signed the consent forms. I signed forms for you and the baby. I don't recall any genetic testing for myself. Sergei moved closer, studying his wife's face with the same intensity he brought to hostile takeovers. Which is strange because most couples pursuing pregnancy after fertility issues would want comprehensive testing. We didn't have fertility issues, Belinda snapped. I got pregnant immediately. Yes, Sergei said softly. You did. Remarkably quickly, considering we were only intimate a handful of times. The silence that followed was deafening. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Sergei could see storm clouds gathering over the city, dark and pregnant with rain. How fitting that his perfectly constructed life was about to be washed away. I think, he said carefully, it's time we discussed the paternity of your child. Belinda's face went pale beneath her expensive makeup. Don't be absurd. Am I being absurd, or am I finally asking the questions I should have asked months ago? He picked up another photo of Letitia's daughters, their faces so bright with joy it hurt to look at them. 3 children, Belinda. 3 healthy, beautiful children born to a woman I convinced myself was broken. Those children could be anyone's, Belinda said desperately. That architect she married, some previous relationship. Look at them. Sergei held up the photo of Naomi, her small face a feminine echo of his own features. Really look at them. Do you see what I see? Belinda looked, and he watched her face crumble as the implications hit her. If Letitia could have children, if she had been able to have children all along, then the problem had never been hers. And if the problem hadn't been hers, I need to make some phone calls, Sergei said quietly, moving toward his desk. Starting with my doctor, then my lawyer, then perhaps a very long overdue conversation with my ex-wife. You can't, Belinda said quickly. If you pursue this, if you start demanding paternity tests and genetic screening, they'll discover... She stopped abruptly, her hand flying to her mouth. They'll discover what, Belinda? She stared at him for a long moment, weighing her options. Finally, her shoulders sagged in defeat. They'll discover that you can't father children, and they'll discover that this baby isn't yours. The words hit him like physical blows, even though some part of him had already known. The truth had been lurking in the shadows of his consciousness for months, whispering doubts he had been too proud to acknowledge. "How long?" he asked. "How long what? How long have you known about my condition?" Belinda's silence was answer enough. She had known from the beginning, had researched him as thoroughly as any business acquisition. She had seen an opportunity in his desperate desire for an heir and his willingness to blame his ex-wife for their childlessness. "The baby shower," he said suddenly. "You're terrified of the baby shower." "I don't know what you mean." "You're afraid that seeing Letitia's children will make me ask questions. You're afraid that I'll finally connect the dots you've been so careful to keep separated." He laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "You're afraid that my barren ex-wife is about to prove that the problem was never hers." Belinda straightened, her spine steel rod straight. "Even if that were true, what would you do about it? Destroy your reputation. Admit that your precious masculinity is a lie. Create a scandal that would ruin both our families." She was right, of course. The smart thing, the practical thing, would be to let sleeping dogs lie, accept the child she was carrying as his own, play the role of devoted husband and father, and never speak of this conversation again. But as Sergei looked at the photos of Letitia's daughters, the children he could never have given her, the family she had built with a man who had loved her exactly as she was, he realized that being smart and practical had cost him everything that mattered. "Maybe it's time for the truth," he said quietly. "No matter what it costs." Belinda's eyes narrowed. "You have no idea what you're threatening to unleash." Chapter 4. 3 Mirrors of Truth. Saturday morning, sunlight streamed through the kitchen windows of the Hanks home, turning ordinary moments into something magical. Letitia watched her daughters navigate their breakfast routine with the precision of a well-rehearsed ballet, each girl moving to her own rhythm while somehow staying perfectly synchronized with her sisters. Ava stood on her step stool at the counter, carefully measuring orange juice into 3 matching cups. At 3 years old, she approached every task with the seriousness of a general planning a campaign, her small face focused with determination that reminded Letitia painfully of herself at that age, before Sergei had taught her that determination was unattractive in women. "Mama, Nani's not drinking her juice," Ava reported, appointed herself the family's morning supervisor. Nani sat at the kitchen table, her dark eyes distant as she stirred her oatmeal in careful circles. Of the 3 girls, she was the observer, the one who noticed everything and said little. Her silence wasn't shyness. It was the quiet of someone who understood more than she let on. "She's thinking about something important," Letitia said, smoothing Nani's hair. "Sometimes we need quiet to sort out our thoughts." Naomi bounced in her chair, syrup somehow coating her fingers, despite the fact that there were no pancakes on her plate. She was joy incarnate, finding wonder in everything from dust motes dancing in sunbeams to the way her own voice echoed in the bathroom. Of the 3, she was most like Tom, open-hearted and endlessly optimistic. "Daddy says we're going to a fancy party today," Naomi announced, climbing into Tom's lap as he joined them at the table. "Will there be cake?" "Probably," Tom said, kissing the top of her head. His eyes found Letitia's across the table, concern flickering in their brown depths. "Are you sure about this?" Before Letitia could answer, Ava appeared at her elbow, holding up a photo that made Letitia's blood freeze. It was an old picture from her first marriage, one she thought she had hidden away completely. In it, she stood beside Sergei at some charity function, her smile brittle and her posture unnaturally perfect. "Who's this man, Mama?" Ava asked with the guileless curiosity of childhood. "He looks like us." The resemblance was undeniable and heartbreaking. Sergei's strong jaw, his dark hair, his intense eyes, they were all reflected in her daughter's faces. But where his features spoke of arrogance and control, theirs radiated innocence and joy. Letitia's hands shook as she took the photo. "Where did you find this?" "In your office, in the box with all the papers." Ava climbed into the chair beside her, studying the picture with scientific interest. "He has Naomi's nose." Tom's face had gone carefully blank, his architect's mind undoubtedly calculating the implications. Nanny looked up from her oatmeal, her wise eyes moving between the photo and her mother's face. "That's the man from your dreams," Nanny said quietly, her small voice cutting through the kitchen's warmth like a cold blade. "The one who makes you cry." Letitia stared at her middle daughter, shocked by the observation. She thought she had hidden her nightmares, her occasional sleepless nights when memories of her first marriage crept in like poison. "You have dreams about this man." Tom's voice was carefully controlled, but Letitia heard the hurt underneath. "Not dreams," she said quickly. "Nightmares. Sometimes I dream about the past, about who I used to be. It doesn't mean anything." But even as she said it, she knew it wasn't entirely true. Sergei Bolmer had shaped her in ways that 4 years of love and healing couldn't completely erase. He lived in the careful way she asked for things instead of demanding them, in her instinct to apologize for taking up space, in the small voice that still whispered that she wasn't enough. "He's the one who hurt you," Ava said matter-of-factly, her child's logic cutting straight to the truth. "Before Daddy found you." Tom's hand found Letitia's across the table, his fingers intertwining with hers. "Is that why we're going to this baby shower? To face him?" "I don't know," Letitia whispered, staring at the photo of her younger self, a woman who had believed that love required sacrifice, that partnership meant submission, that being chosen was more important than being valued. Naomi scrambled down from Tom's lap and came to lean against Letitia's chair. "Don't be sad, Mama. We love you just the way you are." The simple words, spoken with 3-year-old certainty, broke something open in Letitia's chest. These children, her children, had never known her as anything other than whole. To them, she wasn't a woman recovering from emotional abuse or someone learning to trust again. She was simply Mama, the center of their world, worthy of love without condition or compromise. "I love you too," she whispered, pulling Naomi close. "All of you, more than all the stars in the sky." "Even when we're naughty?" Naomi asked hopefully. "Especially when you're naughty," Tom said, joining their impromptu group hug. "That's what families do. We love each other through everything." As they held each other in the morning light, Letitia felt her resolve solidify. Her daughters deserved to grow up knowing that love didn't require perfection, that they were valuable simply because they existed. They deserved to understand the difference between a man who loved conditionally and one who loved completely. "Get dressed, girls," she said finally. "We have a party to attend." An hour later, as she helped them into their matching blue dresses, Letitia marveled at how different this felt from preparing for events during her first marriage. Then, every social gathering had been a performance, a test she might fail. Now, with Tom's steady presence and her daughter's chatter filling the house, she felt armed for battle. "You look beautiful, Mama," Nanny said, her small hands smoothing the skirt of Letitia's emerald dress. "Thank you, sweetheart. You all look beautiful too." "Are we going to meet the man from the picture?" Ava asked, her direct gaze so much like Sergei's it made Letitia's breath catch. "Yes. Will he be mean to you?" The question hung in the air, heavy with the wisdom children possessed about the adults in their lives. How had Ava known to ask? What had she observed in the careful way Letitia spoke about the past? "He might try to be," Letitia said honestly. But he can't hurt me anymore. Do you know why? Because Daddy won't let him, Naomi said immediately. Because we won't let him, Ava added fiercely. Because love is stronger than mean, Nanny concluded, her quiet voice carrying absolute certainty. Tom appeared in the doorway, resplendent in his navy suit, his presence filling the room with safety and strength. "Ready?" "Ready," Letitia said, though her heart hammered against her ribs. As they walked to the car, her daughter's hands in hers, she felt the weight of the medical report hidden in her purse. Today, she would stand in Sergei Balma's world and show him what real love looked like. She would let him see the children she had created with a man who valued her exactly as she was. And if necessary, she would burn down the lies he had built his new life on, even if it meant risking everything she held dear. "Mama," Naomi said, as Tom buckled her into her car seat, "are you scared?" Letitia looked at her youngest daughter's trusting face, then at Tom's steady hands as he checked the other girls' seatbelts, then at the home they had built together, imperfect but real, complicated but true. "Yes," she said, "but sometimes the scariest thing is also the rightest thing." Chapter 5. The Arrival. The Ashworth Country Club existed in a sphere where money whispered instead of shouted, where every detail had been crafted to suggest effortless elegance rather than obvious wealth. Letitia had attended dozens of events here during her first marriage, always feeling like an actress playing a role she hadn't quite mastered. Now, stepping out of Tom's sensible sedan with her 3 daughters, she felt like she was returning to a stage where she had once forgotten her lines. The building itself was a monument to old money and older prejudices, its Georgian architecture designed to intimidate as much as impress. Manicured gardens surrounded the entrance, every flower precisely placed, every hedge trimmed to mathematical perfection. It was the kind of place where appearances mattered more than authenticity, where people competed over charity donations and summer home locations. "Stay close to Mama and Daddy," she murmured to the girls, smoothing Ava's hair one final time. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted Nanny's dress, straightened Naomi's collar. These small rituals of motherhood grounded her, reminded her that she was no longer the insecure woman who had once sought approval from the people inside these walls. The summer air hung heavy with the scent of gardenias and privilege, the kind of atmosphere that made ordinary people feel small and unwelcome. But Tom's hand found hers immediately, his familiar touch grounding her in the present rather than the painful past. The contrast between arriving here with him versus arriving with Sergei was stark. Then she had been an accessory to be displayed. Now she was part of a team. "Breathe," he whispered in her ear, his voice calm and steady. "We're here together. We leave together." Through the club's floor-to-ceiling windows, Letitia could see the party already in full swing. Familiar faces from her old life moved through the elegantly appointed space. Women who had once measured their worth in carats and connections. Men who treated their wives like expensive accessories. The scene was exactly as she remembered. Perfectly coordinated outfits, air kisses that never quite touched cheeks, conversations that sparkled on the surface while remaining empty underneath. At the center of it all, she caught a glimpse of Sergei, his dark hair now touched with silver at the temples, his posture as commanding as ever. He stood near the gift table, accepting congratulations with the practiced ease of someone born to command attention. Even from a distance, she could see the way people gravitated toward him, seeking his approval, his acknowledgement. Some things never changed. Beside him, a blonde woman in designer maternity wear held court with the other wives, her beauty sharp and calculating. Belinda Ashworth. She had seen photos in the society pages, knew the woman's reputation for ambition wrapped in Grace Kelly elegance. Everything about her seemed designed to project perfection, from her flawlessly styled hair to her carefully chosen jewelry that caught the light at precise angles. "That's him," Ava said, pressing her face against the window of the car they hadn't yet fully exited. The man from the picture. Letitia's breath caught. Even from a distance, even after 7 years, Sergei Balmer still possessed the kind of magnetism that drew every eye in the room. He commanded attention effortlessly, his presence filling space in a way that spoke of confidence and control. But there was something different now, a brittleness to his smile, a tension in his shoulders that suggested the cost of maintaining his facade. He looked sad, Nani observed, her perceptive gaze fixed on Sergei's face, even from their distant vantage point. Like he's pretending to be happy, out of the mouths of babes. Even at 3 years old, Nani could see what it had taken Letitia years to recognize, that Sergei's charm was performance, his confidence a carefully constructed mask, designed to hide the insecurities that drove him to demand perfection from everyone around him. Tom stepped around the car to help the girls out, his movements unhurried despite the magnitude of what they were about to do. "Are you ready for this?" he asked, his brown eyes searching Letitia's face. "No," Letitia admitted, watching as valets efficiently directed luxury vehicles in the circular drive. "But I'm ready for it to be over." They walked through the club's marble foyer, past oil paintings of long-dead patriarchs and fresh flower arrangements that cost more than most people's monthly rent. The girls stayed close, their small hands finding each other instinctively as they navigated this strange new world. Their innocent wonder at the opulent surroundings, the crystal chandeliers, the Persian rugs, the staff in crisp uniforms, reminded Letitia of how foreign this environment really was to normal life. The contrast between her daughters and the children she remembered from events like this was striking. Where society children were often small adults, coached in proper behavior and appropriate responses, Ava, Nani, and Naomi radiated genuine joy and curiosity. They hadn't been taught to perform for approval. They simply existed as themselves, secure in their parents' love. The moment they entered the main reception room, conversations stuttered to a halt, like a record player suddenly unplugged. Letitia felt the weight of 50 pairs of eyes, the whispered recognition spreading through the crowd like ripples on still water. She held her head high, one hand gripping Tom's arm, the other resting protectively on Naomi's shoulder. The room itself was stunning. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the golf course, tables draped in pale blue linen, centerpieces of white roses and baby's breath that probably cost more than most people's car payments. Everything was designed to project effortless elegance, though Letitia now recognized how much effort actually went into creating that impression. "Letitia Wright," someone breathed, though she had been Letitia Hanks for 4 years now. "I heard she remarried, but I never expected. Are those her children? But I thought she couldn't. They look exactly like—" The whispers crashed over them in waves, but Letitia kept walking, her daughters flanking her like tiny bodyguards. She recognized many of the faces, women who had once invited her to lunch out of obligation to Sergei's status, men who had dismissed her opinions while praising her appearance. None of them had ever really seen her. She had been invisible except as Sergei's wife. Ava lifted her chin with regal dignity, apparently unbothered by the attention. Nani observed everything with wide, curious eyes, taking in details that would undoubtedly surface in later conversations. And Naomi smiled at the strangers with infectious warmth, her natural friendliness a stark contrast to the calculated pleasantries surrounding them. "Look at those dresses," one woman murmured admiringly. "Absolutely precious." "But the resemblance," another whispered. "It's uncanny." 7 years, a third voice added. 7 years since the divorce, and now this. Across the room, Sergei turned at the commotion. The champagne glass in his hand trembled as their eyes met across 20 feet and 7 years of silence, and the world seemed to narrow to just that moment of recognition. She watched his face cycle through emotions, shock, confusion, and something that might have been wonder or terror. But it was when his gaze dropped to the triplets that his composure truly shattered. The glass slipped from his fingers, as if his nervous system had simply stopped functioning, crystal exploding against the marble floor in a sound like breaking dreams. The crash seemed to echo in the sudden silence, every conversation dying as everyone turned to stare at the man who had just lost control in the most public way possible. "Sergei?" Belinda Ashworth appeared at his side with predatory speed, her manicured hand gripping his arm with visible tension. "Darling, what's wrong?" But Sergei couldn't answer. He was staring at Ava, Nani, and Naomi with the expression of a man seeing ghosts, his face pale beneath his expensive tan. The resemblance was undeniable. The dark hair, the strong jaw, the intelligent eyes that had once been his greatest pride were now reflected in three small faces that should have been impossible. Staff materialized to clean up the broken glass, their efficiency practiced and discreet. But nothing could clean up the emotional wreckage spreading through the room as guests put together the pieces of a puzzle that redefined everything they thought they knew about Sergei Bolmer's perfect life. "Hello, Sergei," Letitia said, her voice carrying clearly across the silent room. She began walking toward him, her daughters moving with her like a small army. Each step felt momentous, weighted with the significance of this public confrontation. "Thank you for the invitation. I'd like you to meet my family." With each step, the tension in the room ratcheted higher. Society matrons leaned forward like vultures sensing carrion, their whispered speculation growing bolder as the implications became clear. The men stood frozen, caught between politeness and curiosity, unsure whether they were witnessing a reunion or a reckoning. Tom stayed slightly behind, his presence a wall of quiet strength. He had insisted on coming, despite knowing this moment belonged to Letitia and her past, understanding instinctively that some battles required witnesses. His steady breathing, his calm energy, reminded her that she wasn't alone in this confrontation. "These are my daughters," Letitia continued as they reached the center of the room, where the gift table displayed an obscene amount of expensive baby items. "Ava, Nani, and Naomi. Girls, this is Mr. Bolmer." Ava stepped forward first, her small hand extended with perfect manners that Tom had taught her. "Hello, Mr. Bolmer. Mama says you used to know each other." Sergei stared at the offered hand as if it were a snake, his own trembling as he reached out to shake it. The contact lasted only seconds, but Letitia saw the shock of recognition cross his features. These were his gestures, his expressions, reflected in miniature. "Hello," he managed, his voice cracking on the simple word. Nani hung back slightly, her intuitive nature clearly picking up on the emotional undercurrents swirling through the room like a dangerous tide. She pressed closer to Letitia's side, her small hand finding her mother's skirt and gripping tight. But Naomi bounced forward with characteristic enthusiasm, her bright smile lighting up her face like a sunbeam cutting through storm clouds. "Are you having a baby?" she asked with 3-year-old directness. "Mama said someone was having a baby." "My wife is," Sergei said faintly, his eyes never leaving the triplets' faces. "We're having a baby." "That's nice," Naomi said politely, her natural warmth shining through despite the strange atmosphere. "Babies are fun. We know because Mrs. Martinez next door just had one and it's very small and wrinkly." A few nervous laughs rippled through the crowd, but the tension remained thick enough to cut. People pretended to return to their conversations, but every ear was tuned to this unfolding drama. Phones discreetly appeared, society photographers sensing a story that would dominate gossip columns for weeks. Belinda moved closer to Sergei, her face a mask of forced politeness that couldn't quite hide the panic in her eyes. Everything about her body language screamed calculation. The way she positioned herself between Sergei and the children, the tightness around her eyes despite her practiced smile. "How lovely that you could come," Belinda said, her voice honeyed with false warmth. "Though I must say, I wasn't expecting you to bring children. This is rather an adult affair." "Children love parties," Tom said mildly, speaking for the first time since they'd entered. His voice carried the quiet authority of a man comfortable in his own skin, unimpressed by displays of wealth or status. "And they're very well behaved." Belinda's gaze flicked to Tom, taking in his steady presence, his obvious devotion to Letitia and the girls. Her calculation was visible, her mind clearly working through the implications of what she was seeing: a happy family, a devoted husband, children who looked disturbingly familiar. "And you are?" she asked with brittle politeness. "Tom Hanks, Letitia's husband, the girl's father." The word father hit Sergei like a physical blow. He swayed slightly, gripping the edge of the gift table for support, his face going even paler as the reality settled over him. These children, these impossible, beautiful children, called another man father. "Daddy builds houses," Ava informed the gathered crowd with pride, her voice clear and confident, "really tall ones that touch the sky. And he makes the best pancakes," Naomi added, beaming up at Tom with pure adoration. "With chocolate chips." "He reads us stories every night," Nani said quietly, her small voice carrying clearly in the hushed room. "Even when he's tired from work." With each innocent revelation, Sergei's composure cracked further. Here was everything he had claimed to want: family, legacy, children who looked at their father with love instead of fear. But it belonged to another man, a better man, a man who had loved Letitia exactly as she was, rather than trying to remake her in his image. The crowd was beginning to murmur again, the significance of the moment not lost on anyone present. Everyone knew the story of Sergei and Letitia's divorce, the whispered rumors about her inability to conceive, the public humiliation she had endured. Now those whispers were dying in the face of 3 living contradictions. "Well," someone said finally, breaking the spell, "what lovely children. They're beautiful, Letitia." "Thank you," Letitia replied, her voice steady despite the emotional earthquake happening around her. "We think so too." As if released from a trance, the party slowly resumed its rhythm. Conversations restarted, glasses were refilled, and the gift-opening ceremony began with forced enthusiasm. But the damage was done. Questions hung in the air like smoke, and every eye in the room kept drifting back to the impossible sight of Sergei Bolmer's ex-wife, surrounded by children who looked exactly like him. Through it all, little Ava watched the adults with the sharp intelligence she had inherited from both her parents. Something was wrong here, her expression said. Something important was being left unsaid. Her dark eyes, so like Sergei's but filled with a warmth his had never possessed, moved between the grown-ups as if she were solving a complex puzzle. And as the afternoon wore on, as gifts were opened and congratulations offered with increasing strain, she began to form a plan with the devastating simplicity that only children possessed. "Mr. Bolmer," she said during a lull in conversation, her clear voice cutting through the party noise like a blade through silk, "are you the man who made my mama cry?" Chapter 6. Confrontation of Souls. The rose garden behind the Ashworth Country Club had always been Letitia's refuge during the unbearable social events of her first marriage. Hidden behind walls of climbing tea roses and English ivy, it was the one place where she could drop her mask and simply breathe. Now, as Sergei followed her into this familiar sanctuary, she felt the weight of 7 years pressing down on her shoulders like stones. "You came," he said unnecessarily, his voice rough with emotions she couldn't name. "You invited me." Letitia turned to face him, noting how the afternoon light revealed new lines around his eyes, the way success had carved itself into his features. He was still handsome, would always be handsome. But there was something hollow about it now, like a beautiful shell with nothing living inside. I never expected you to actually... He stopped, running his hands through his hair in a gesture she remembered too well. God, Letitia, they look exactly like me. Do they? She kept her voice carefully neutral, though her heart was hammering against her ribs. I hadn't noticed. Don't. His voice cracked on the word. Don't pretend this isn't happening. Those children, Ava, Nani, Naomi, they're mine, aren't they? The question hung between them like a blade. Through the garden's French doors, Letitia could see Tom playing with the girls in the club's family room, his patient attention focused entirely on their animated storytelling. He looked up once, meeting her eyes through the glass, his expression steady and trusting. "What makes you think that?" she asked quietly. "Look at them, Letitia. Really look at them. They have my eyes, my jaw, your arrogance." The words slipped out before she could stop them, sharp and cutting. Sergei flinched as if she had struck him. "I deserved that. You deserved worse than that." 7 years of buried anger began to surface, hot and dangerous. "You destroyed me, Sergei. You convinced me I was broken, worthless, defective. You made me believe that my only value was in giving you children, and when we couldn't, you threw me away like garbage. I was wrong." The admission came out broken, barely audible. "I was so wrong about everything." "Were you?" Letitia stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more force than shouting. "Or are you just sorry because now you see what you lost?" Sergei's hand shook as he reached toward her, then fell to his sides when she stepped back. "I've regretted leaving you every day for 7 years, every single day. While you were building your empire? While you were marrying your perfect blonde wife? While you were planning the family you could never have with me?" Each word was a weapon, precisely aimed. "Forgive me if I don't believe your regret was particularly inconvenient. You don't understand. I understand perfectly." Letitia pulled out her phone, scrolling to a photo from the Triplets' last birthday party. In it, Tom had flour in his hair from making their cake from scratch, all 3 girls clinging to him while he laughed at something Naomi had whispered in his ear. "This is what love looks like, Sergei. This is what it means to choose someone every day, not just when it's easy." Sergei stared at the photo as if it were written in a foreign language. "He's a good father. He's the only father they've ever known. But I'm there. You're nothing to them." The words came out harsher than she intended, but she didn't take them back. "You're a stranger who made their mother cry. That's all you are, all you'll ever be." Sergei sank onto one of the garden benches, his head in his hands. For a moment, he looked like the man she had fallen in love with all those years ago, vulnerable, uncertain, human. It would have been easier if he had been the monster she had painted him as in her mind. "I know I have no right to ask," he said without looking up, "but are they happy? Are you happy?" The question caught her off guard. She had expected demands, threats, legal posturing. She hadn't expected this quiet devastation, this genuine concern for their well-being. "Yes," she said simply. "We're very happy. Good." He looked up at her, and she saw tears tracking down his cheeks. "That's all I ever wanted for you. I just didn't know how to give it to you myself." Through the glass doors, Tom appeared with Naomi on his shoulders, Ava and Nani racing ahead of him as they played some elaborate game. The sight of her family, whole, joyful, unbroken, strengthened her resolve. "I need to ask you something," she said, her voice steadier now, "and I need you to tell me the truth. Anything. During our marriage, did you ever suspect that maybe the problem wasn't with me?" Sergei's face went completely still, The question hung in the garden air, heavy with implications that could destroy more than just his pride. Sergei, I... He stopped, swallowed hard, tried again. There were tests. Early in our marriage, when we first started trying, my doctor suggested some additional screening, but I refused. I was so sure, so arrogant. You knew. The realization hit her like a physical blow. You knew it might be you, and you let me believe I was broken. I was terrified, he whispered, terrified that if it was me, if I couldn't, what kind of man would that make me? What kind of legacy could I leave? I convinced myself it had to be you, because the alternative was unthinkable. Letitia stared at him, watching 7 years of carefully constructed hatred crumble into something more complicated. Pity, perhaps, or the exhausted aftermath of fury. He hadn't been a monster. He had been a coward. You destroyed us both, she said quietly. Your pride, your fear, it poisoned everything. I know. He stood slowly, moving toward the garden's exit. I know, and I'm sorry. I'm sorrier than you'll ever know. Sergei, wait. He turned back, hope flickering in his eyes. Your wife, Belinda, is the baby yours? The hope died instantly. I don't know, he admitted. I'm beginning to suspect it's not. And if it's not, then I'll have gotten exactly what I deserve. A life built on lies, surrounded by people who see me as nothing more than a bank account. He managed a bitter smile. Rather poetic, don't you think? Before Letitia could respond, the garden door burst open. Tom stood in the doorway, his usually calm face tight with controlled fury. Letitia, he said, his voice carefully level. We need to leave. Now. What's wrong? Your daughters just heard someone at the party suggest that they might not be mine. His eyes locked on Sergei with laser intensity. They're confused and upset, and Ava is asking questions I don't know how to answer. The words hit Letitia like ice water. She had been so focused on confronting her past that she had forgotten about protecting her children's present. We're leaving, she said immediately, moving toward Tom. Letitia, wait. Sergei stepped forward desperately. Please, just tell me. Are they mine? I need to know. She paused at the threshold, looking back at the man who had once been her entire world. In the distance, she could hear Naomi crying, could see Ava's small face pressed against the window as she searched for her parents. Yes, she said quietly. Biologically, they're yours. But Sergei, biology isn't what makes a father. Then what does? Tom appeared beside her, his steady presence a reminder of everything real and true in her life. Love, he said simply. Love makes a father. Love and showing up every single day, even when it's hard. As they walked away, leaving Sergei alone in the garden with the truth he had demanded, Letitia felt something shift inside her chest. The past was finally where it belonged, behind her. Ahead, her daughters needed her, and her husband was waiting to help her face whatever came next. But she didn't see Belinda Ashworth step out from behind the rose trellis, her face white with fury and terror as she realized what she had just overheard. Chapter 7. The Perfect Storm. The ladies' restroom at the Ashworth Country Club had witnessed countless secrets over the decades. Whispered affairs, family scandals, business deals sealed with handshakes between stalls. But as Letitia splashed cool water on her face, trying to steady herself after the garden confrontation, she sensed she was about to become part of the club's most explosive revelation yet. Well, well, if it isn't the infamous Letitia Wright. Belinda Ashworth's voice cut through the marble and gold silence like shattered crystal. Letitia looked up to find Sergei's wife standing behind her, her reflection in the ornate mirror a study in barely controlled fury. It's Letitia Hanks now, she corrected quietly, reaching for a towel. Has been for 4 years. How convenient that you forgot to mention that when we sent the invitation to your maiden name. Belinda moved closer, her designer heels clicking against the marble floor with predatory precision. Though I suppose deception runs in your family now. Letitia turned to face her, noting the way Belinda's perfect composure was beginning to crack around the edges. Her makeup was still flawless, her blonde hair still smoothly styled, but there was something wild in her eyes, the look of a cornered animal preparing to fight. I'm not sure what you mean. Don't play innocent with me. Belinda's voice dropped to a vicious whisper. I heard everything in the garden. Every pathetic word of Sergei's confession, every moment of your little truth session. Ice formed in Letitia's veins. You were listening? I was protecting my interests. Belinda moved to the restroom door, turning the lock with a soft click. Do you have any idea what you've done? What you've destroyed by bringing those children here today? I've told the truth. Something you might want to try sometime. Belinda's laugh was sharp enough to cut glass. The truth? You want to talk about truth? Let me tell you some truths, darling. I've spent 2 years building the perfect life with your ex-husband. 2 years convincing him he's finally found happiness. 2 years planning for the future we're going to build together. A future built on lies, Letitia said softly. The baby you're carrying, it's not his, is it? The question hit its mark. Belinda's face went pale beneath her foundation, her hand moving instinctively to her rounded belly. How dare you? It's not an accusation. It's a fact. Letitia stepped closer, her voice gaining strength. You know about Sergei's condition. You've known all along. That's why you targeted him. A desperate man with unlimited resources and a genetic condition that made him the perfect mark. Belinda was quiet for a long moment, her calculation visible as she weighed her options. Finally, her shoulders straightened and she smiled with cold precision. You're right, she said simply, about all of it. Sergei can't father children, never could. This baby belongs to Marcus Rothwell, my business partner, a man with significantly less money but considerably more vitality. The casual admission was somehow more chilling than any denial would have been. Letitia stared at this woman who could destroy lives with such elegant ease, who could build an entire marriage on calculated deception. Why tell me this? Because knowledge is power, and I want you to understand exactly what's at stake here. Belinda began pacing the small space like a caged predator. If you pursue this paternity nonsense, if you allow Sergei to demand genetic testing, my carefully constructed world comes crashing down. But more importantly for you, so does yours. What do you mean? I mean that if I go down, I'm taking you with me. Belinda pulled out her phone, scrolling through photos with surgical precision. I've already documented everything from today. Your children's obvious resemblance to Sergei, their ages, the timeline of your pregnancy versus your divorce. One call to my lawyer, and I can make a very compelling case that you've been hiding his biological children from him for 3 years. Letitia felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. That's not... You can't prove... Can't I? A simple DNA test would prove paternity. A review of medical records would show the timing of conception. And once that's established, what do you think happens to your perfect little family? What happens when the courts have to decide custody between a billionaire biological father and an architect stepfather? The threat hung in the perfumed air between them, sharp and deadly. Letitia thought of Tom's steady love, of her daughters calling him daddy, of the life they had built together brick by careful brick. You wouldn't destroy children's lives just to protect your secret. I would destroy anyone's life to protect my interests. Belinda's smile was beautiful and terrible. Those children don't know Sergei from any stranger on the street. Do you really want to put them through years of custody battles, media attention, questions about why their mother lied to them their entire lives? I never lied to them. Didn't you? By omission, by silence, by letting them believe Tom is their biological father? Belinda leaned against the marble counter, her posture casual despite the venom in her words. I wonder what he'll think when he learns the truth. Oh, wait, he already knows, doesn't he? I saw his face during your little garden party. The poor man has been living with this knowledge, wondering when the other shoe would drop. Letitia's chest tightened. Tom had suspected, of course he had suspected, the timing, the resemblance, her carefully guarded secrets about her first marriage. He had known and loved them anyway, loved her anyway, without ever demanding the truth she wasn't ready to give. Here's what's going to happen, Belinda continued, her voice taking on the crisp efficiency of a business presentation. You're going to take your little family and disappear from our lives forever. No more contact with Sergei, no more surprise appearances at social events, no more questions about paternity or medical conditions. And if I don't, then I destroy everything you hold dear. Belinda's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the calculating mind beneath the beautiful facade. I have resources you can't imagine, connections that reach into every corner of this city. I can make your husband's business fail, can ensure your children face scrutiny and speculation for the rest of their lives. I can make Sergei believe you deliberately hid his children from him out of spite. The bathroom door handle rattled suddenly, followed by a soft knock. Letitia, Tom's voice, concerned and patient. The girls are ready to go home. Both women froze, the sound of normalcy breaking through their toxic bubble. Letitia stared at Belinda, seeing her clearly for the first time, not just as a rival or an obstacle, but as someone willing to destroy innocent lives to protect her lies. You have 24 hours to decide, Belinda whispered, moving toward the door. Disappear quietly, or watch everything you love burn. But as she reached for the lock, Letitia's voice stopped her cold. You made one mistake, Belinda. What? Letitia pulled out her own phone, the screen showing a recording app that had been running for the past 10 minutes. You assumed I was as naive as I used to be. You assumed I wouldn't learn from my past mistakes. Belinda's face went deadly pale. You recorded every word, every threat, every admission. Letitia's voice was steady now, powered by a fury that burned cold and clean. You're right about one thing. Knowledge is power. And now I have all the knowledge I need. As she unlocked the door and stepped out to meet her family, Letitia heard Belinda's sharp intake of breath behind her. The war was just beginning, but for the first time in 7 years, Letitia Wright Hanks was armed for battle. Tom stood waiting with the triplets, his face immediately registering her distress. What happened? We need to go home, she said quietly, gathering her daughters close. We need to go home, and then we need to talk. Chapter 8, When Love Breaks. The drive home from the country club passed in heavy silence, broken only by the soft murmur of the triplets discussing the party in the back seat. Letitia stared out the passenger window at the familiar streets of their neighborhood, each landmark a reminder of the life she might be about to lose. Tom's hands gripped the steering wheel with controlled tension, his usual calm fractured by the weight of unspoken truths. The very air in the car felt different, charged with electricity, thick with secrets that had been buried too long. Letitia could feel the space between her and Tom expanding with each mile, an invisible chasm opening where once there had been perfect understanding. She watched his profile in the dying light, memorizing the strong line of his jaw, the way concentration creased his forehead. How many more times would she have the privilege of studying his face like this? Daddy, why was everyone whispering about us? Ava's voice cut through the quiet, her precocious intelligence already working to solve the puzzle of adult behavior. Sometimes grown-ups gossip about things they don't understand, Tom replied, his voice carefully measured. But Letitia heard the strain underneath, the effort it took to maintain normalcy for their daughters. It's not very nice, but it happens. Were they saying mean things about Mama? Nani asked, her perceptive nature picking up on the emotional undercurrents flowing through the car like a toxic fog. It doesn't matter what they were saying, Letitia said firmly, turning to look at her daughters. 3 pairs of dark eyes stared back at her, Sergei's eyes, though they would never know it. The resemblance that had caused such a stir at the party was unmistakable now that she was looking for it. How had she convinced herself that Tom wouldn't notice? What matters is that we're together, and we love each other. Always, Naomi agreed cheerfully, apparently untroubled by the afternoon's tensions. Even when people are weird. If only it were that simple, Letitia thought. If only love could solve everything, protect everyone, keep families whole through sheer force of devotion. But she was about to learn that love without honesty was a house built on sand, beautiful but ultimately unstable. Once home, Tom suggested the girls play in the garden while he and Letitia talked. They settled in his study, surrounded by architectural drawings and family photos, the room that had become their sanctuary for difficult conversations. But as Letitia sat across from her husband in the leather chair she had helped him pick out 3 years ago, she realized she had never faced anything this difficult before. The study held so many memories, late nights when Tom worked on designs while she curled up reading, Sunday mornings when the girls climbed into his lap to help with blueprints, quiet conversations about dreams and plans and the future they were building together. Would this be the room where all of that ended? "I need to tell you something," she began, then stopped, her courage failing. Tom waited with the patience that had first attracted her to him, his brown eyes steady and encouraging. This man who had rebuilt her confidence word by word, touch by touch, deserved so much better than the devastation she was about to unleash. "The girls," she said finally, "biologically, they're Sergei's." To his credit, Tom didn't flinch, didn't look surprised, didn't react with anything other than quiet acceptance. "I know. You... what? I've known for a while. The timing, the resemblance. I'm not blind, Letitia." He leaned forward in his chair, his hands clasped tightly together. "What I don't understand is why you never told me." The question hung between them like a chasm. Letitia felt tears threatening, her chest tight with the weight of 3 years of hidden truth. She had rehearsed this conversation 1,000 times in her mind, but faced with Tom's gentle disappointment, all her careful explanations crumbled. "Because I was terrified," she whispered, "terrified that if you knew, you'd love them less. Love me less. Terrified that Sergei would try to take them if he ever found out." "Take them?" Tom's voice sharpened. "What do you mean?" With shaking hands, Letitia pulled out her phone and played the recording from the country club restroom. As Belinda's threats filled the study, she watched Tom's face cycle through shock, anger, and something harder, a protective fury she had never seen before. The recording seemed to last forever, each of Belinda's calculated words another nail in the coffin of her marriage. When it finally ended, the silence was deafening. Tom sat motionless, processing what he had heard, his architect's mind undoubtedly calculating the implications of every threat. "She threatened our children," he said when the recording ended, his voice deadly quiet. "She threatened everything, our marriage, your business, the girl's future." "Our marriage?" Tom stood abruptly, beginning to pace the small space like a caged animal. "Letitia, do you honestly think I would love you less because of some biological detail? Do you think fatherhood is just about DNA?" The pain in his voice was like a physical blow. She watched him move restlessly around the room, touching familiar objects. A photo of their wedding day, the girls' first drawings taped to his drafting table, a coffee mug she had given him that read, "World's Best Dad." Each touch seemed to ground him, remind him of what they had built together. I don't know what I think anymore, she admitted, breaking down completely. Years of suppressed fear and guilt poured out of her in ugly, heaving sobs. I've been keeping this secret for so long, I forgot how to tell the truth. I've been so scared of losing you all that I nearly lost you anyway. Tom stopped pacing, turning to look at her with an expression she couldn't read. In the fading light from the window, he looked older somehow, worn down by the weight of her deception. This man who had given her everything, love, security, a family, a future, and she had repaid him with lies. You really thought I might leave you over this? I thought you might question everything. Wonder if I married you for security, if I ever really loved you, if the girls and I were just some sort of package deal you got stuck with. Stop! The word came out harsh, final. Just stop. The silence that followed was deafening. Outside, Letitia could hear the girls playing, their laughter a painful reminder of what was at stake. Ava was teaching her sisters some elaborate game, her voice clear and confident as she explained the rules. These children who called Tom Daddy with such complete trust, who had never known a world where he wasn't their father in every way that mattered. When Tom spoke again, his voice was so quiet she had to strain to hear it. Do you want to know what hurts the most? It's not that they're biologically his. It's that you didn't trust me enough to tell me. 4 years, Letitia. 4 years of marriage, of building a life together, of me loving those girls as my own, and you thought I was so shallow that genetics would matter to me. Each word was a knife to her heart, all the more painful because they were true. She had protected everyone except the one person who deserved her trust most. The man who had never given her a single reason to doubt his love, who had proven every day through word and deed that family was about choice, not blood. You're right, she whispered. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry doesn't fix this. Tom moved to his desk, pulling out a small overnight bag she hadn't noticed before. The sight of it made her stomach drop. He had been planning this, had known this moment was coming. I need some time to think, to figure out if the woman I married is the woman I thought she was, or someone who's been lying to me for 3 years. Terror flooded her system, cold and paralyzing. You're leaving? I'm going to stay at my brother's for a few days. The girls can stay here with you. They don't need their world turned upside down any more than it already has been. The practical consideration, even in his pain, was so fundamentally Tom that it nearly broke her. Even angry, even hurt, his first thought was protecting the children who weren't biologically his, but whom he loved completely. Tom, please. We can work through this. Can we? Because right now, I don't know what's real anymore. I don't know if you married me because you loved me, or because you needed a father for Sergei's children. I don't know if every time you said you trusted me, you were lying. The accusations hit her like physical blows, each one deserved, but devastating. She watched the man she loved more than breathing pack his bag with the same careful precision he brought to everything else. His movements were economical, practiced. How many times had he fantasized about this moment? How long had he been waiting for the other shoe to drop? I love you, she said desperately, standing and moving toward him. I love you more than I ever loved him, more than I thought possible. You're not a replacement or a convenience. You're everything to me. Tom paused in his packing, his shoulders sagging with exhaustion. For a moment she thought she had reached him, that love might be enough to bridge the chasm her deception had created. I believe you love me, but love without trust isn't enough, Letitia. And right now I don't know if you're capable of the kind of trust a marriage requires. Please don't do this. Please don't leave us. I'm not leaving you. His voice broke slightly on the words. I need space to think, to figure out how to move forward from here. As he moved toward the door, the sound of small feet running down the hallway made them both freeze. The girls had finished their game, were coming to find them. In seconds, their daughters would discover that their world was fracturing, that the man they called Daddy was walking away. Naomi burst into the study first, her face bright with excitement. "Daddy, come see the butterfly I found. It's yellow and black and—" She stopped, taking in the scene before her with the uncanny perception of childhood. Tom standing by the door with a suitcase, Letitia's tear-stained face, the weight of adult emotion filling the room like smoke. "Daddy, why do you have a suitcase?" Tom knelt down to her level, his face immediately softening despite the pain radiating from him. Even in his own anguish, he found the strength to be gentle with his daughter, the daughter who shared none of his genes, but all of his heart. "I have to go away for a little while, sweetheart. But it's not forever. Are you leaving us?" The question came out small and scared, and Letitia saw Tom's resolve crack like ice under pressure. "I'm not leaving you. I could never leave you girls. Daddy just needs to think about some grown-up things." Like the mean man made Mama sad? Naomi's innocent question hit the target with devastating accuracy. Tom's eyes found Letitia's across the room, and for a moment, the love and pain in them nearly broke her. This wasn't how their story was supposed to go. They were supposed to be the family that made it, the couple who proved that love could overcome anything. "Something like that," he said quietly. Ava and Nani appeared in the doorway, drawn by their sister's distress. When they saw Tom's bag, their faces crumpled with identical expressions of confusion and fear. 3 little girls who had never known abandonment were about to experience it for the first time. "Daddy, are you leaving us like the mean man left Mama?" Ava asked, her voice shaking with the kind of fear that children shouldn't have to feel. The question hung in the air like a physical presence. Tom closed his eyes, his hand trembling as he reached out to touch Ava's face. The comparison to Sergei, the man who had destroyed their mother and now threatened to destroy them, was the cruelest cut of all. "I'm not him," he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "I could never be him." But sometimes, even people who love each other very much need time apart to figure things out. "But we need you," Nani whispered, tears tracking down her cheeks. Tom pulled all 3 girls into his arms, his own tears finally falling. The sight of this good man, this devoted father, crying with the children he had raised from infancy, was almost too painful to bear. Letitia wanted to rush to them, to throw her arms around the whole group and somehow hold them together through sheer force of will. "And I need you too, more than you'll ever know. That's why Daddy has to make sure he's the best daddy he can be." "Will you come back?" Ava asked, her practical mind already working through the logistics of abandonment. "I don't know what's going to happen," Tom said honestly, "but I promise you this, no matter what happens between Mama and me, I will always be your daddy. Always." As Letitia watched her family embrace in the doorway, her heart shattered into pieces so small she wondered if they could ever be put back together. Outside, a car engine started, but it wasn't Tom's. Through the window, she saw Sergei Balmer sitting in his Mercedes, watching their house with an expression of desperate longing. The battle for her family was about to begin, and she had just lost her most important ally. Chapter 9. The Fight for Everything. Monday morning arrived like a sentencing, grey and cold despite the summer season. Letitia had spent the weekend in a haze of explanations to the girls about why Daddy was staying at Uncle James's house, of phone calls from Tom that were carefully polite and devastatingly distant, of staring at legal documents that threatened to tear her world apart. The sound of expensive engines in her usually quiet neighborhood had been building since dawn. By 8:30, 3 black sedans lined her street like a funeral procession, their tinted windows reflecting the morning light with ominous precision. Neighbors peered through curtains, their curiosity palpable as they tried to understand what drama was unfolding in the house where the nice family with triplets lived. The knock on her front door came at exactly 9 o'clock, accompanied by the synchronized closing of car doors that spoke of military-style coordination. Through the peephole, she saw 3 men in dark suits, their faces bearing the carefully neutral expressions of professional destroyers. Behind them, she could make out more figures: process servers, investigators, people whose job it was to dismantle lives with surgical precision. Letitia Hanks. The lead attorney was young, ambitious, with shark-like politeness that preceded devastation. His smile was perfectly calibrated, warm enough to seem human, cold enough to deliver bad news without flinching. "I'm Richard Morrison from Kellerman Associates. We represent Sergei Bulmer in a matter concerning parental rights." Her hand shook as she accepted the legal papers, their weight somehow heavier than mere documents should be. The letterhead was expensive, embossed, the kind that announced serious money behind serious threats. Emergency petition for genetic testing, temporary custody order, pending paternity confirmation, motion for immediate visitation rights. The words blurred together as she tried to process their meaning. 3 years of carefully built security crumbling with each line of legal jargon. These weren't just papers. They were weapons aimed at the heart of everything she held dear. "This is impossible," she whispered, scanning the legal language that would destroy her family. Her voice sounded foreign to her own ears, thin and shaky. "He can't. The girls don't even know him. Mr. Bulmer has reason to believe he is the biological father of your triplets," Morrison continued with practiced efficiency, his tone suggesting this was routine business rather than the destruction of a family. Given the timeline of conception and the children's obvious physical resemblance, the court has granted an emergency hearing for this afternoon at 2 o'clock. This afternoon? Panic flooded her system, ice water in her veins. "I need time to get a lawyer to prepare." The urgency was deemed necessary given that Mr. Bulmer has allegedly been denied access to his biological children for over 3 years. Morrison's smile was sharp as broken glass, his satisfaction barely concealed. "The court takes parental alienation very seriously, Mrs. Hanks. I trust you'll be in attendance." Behind him, one of his associates was photographing her house, documenting the home where Sergei's alleged children lived. Another was making notes on a legal pad, probably recording her emotional state, her apparent lack of legal representation, anything that could be used against her in court. "What happens if I don't come?" The question slipped out before she could stop it, desperation making her voice crack. "Then the court will issue a default judgment in Mr. Bulmer's favor. Temporary custody would be granted immediately." Morrison's tone was matter-of-fact, as if he were discussing the weather rather than the destruction of a family. "I wouldn't recommend that course of action." As the lawyers departed, their expensive shoes clicking against her front walk like the sound of inevitability, Letitia sank against her front door. The papers scattered around her feet like the debris of her former life, each page a nail in the coffin of her happiness. Upstairs, she could hear the girls playing in their room, their laughter floating down like music from another world. They were blissfully unaware that their entire universe was about to be shattered, that strangers in suits were plotting to tear them away from the only father they had ever known. Her phone rang. Tom's ringtone. She grabbed it desperately, hope flaring in her chest like a match in the darkness. "I heard." His voice was grim but strong, filled with the controlled fury of a man whose family was under attack. "James saw the lawyers leave your house. I'm coming over." "Tom, you don't have to. We're not your problem anymore." "Like hell you're not." The fierce protectiveness in his voice made her knees weak with relief. This man who had every right to walk away, who had been betrayed and lied to, was still fighting for them. "Those are my daughters in there, and no court document changes that. I'll be there in 20 minutes. True to his word, Tom arrived with James, his contractor brother whose own protective instincts had been triggered by the legal assault on his family. Behind them came Sandra Wu, the best family attorney in the city, her reputation for destroying opposing counsel legendary in legal circles. Letitia had never been so grateful to see anyone in her life, though the careful distance Tom maintained between them was a constant ache. He was here, but the space between them felt like an ocean, so much damage to repair, so much trust to rebuild. "This is aggressive but not unusual," Sandra explained as she reviewed the legal documents with the intensity of a general studying battlefield reports. Her dark eyes scanned each page with practiced efficiency, noting clauses and implications that would escape civilian understanding. When biological fathers discover children they weren't aware of, courts tend to err on the side of parental rights. However, there are several factors that work in our favor. "Such as?" Tom asked, his architect's mind immediately focusing on solutions rather than problems. Even in crisis, he approached challenges with methodical precision. The children's ages, their established family structure, and the fact that Mr. Ballmer voluntarily relinquished any claim to them through his divorce agreement. Sandra looked up from the papers, her expression cautiously optimistic but realistic about the challenges ahead. The key is demonstrating that disrupting their current situation would be harmful to their best interests. "What about his wife's threats?" Letitia asked, pulling out her phone. "I have recordings. Inadmissible in family court, unfortunately, but they might be useful in other ways." Sandra made notes on her legal pad, her handwriting precise and economical. "I'm more concerned about how we explain 3 years of secrecy. The court will want to understand why you never informed Mr. Ballmer about the children." Before Letitia could answer, sounds of distress came from upstairs, not the usual squabbles of siblings, but genuine fear. They rushed to find Ava standing at her bedroom window, her small face pressed against the glass, her usual confidence replaced by anxiety that made Letitia's chest tighten. "There's the mean man again," she said quietly, her voice carrying the weight of a child trying to make sense of adult complications. "He's been sitting out there all morning." Letitia looked out to see Sergei's Mercedes parked across the street, the man himself visible behind the wheel. Even from a distance, she could see his desperation, the way he leaned forward as if trying to catch glimpses of the children he believed were his. His presence felt like a violation, a predator watching their safe space. "He's not allowed to be here," Sandra said immediately, pulling out her phone with the efficiency of someone accustomed to crisis management. "I'm calling the police." "Wait." Tom's voice was thoughtful, his engineer's mind working through the problem from multiple angles. "Maybe we should talk to him first. Find out what he really wants." "Absolutely not," Letitia said quickly, her protective instincts flaring. "I won't have him near the girls." "Mama, why is everyone scared of the sad man?" Nani asked, her perceptive gaze moving between the adults as she tried to read the emotional temperature of the room. The question stopped them all cold. From a child's perspective, Sergei wasn't a threat. He was just another confused adult in a world full of inexplicable grown-up behavior. Her innocence highlighted the absurdity of the situation, the way adult fears and failures contaminated everything they touched. "Because grown-ups sometimes make things complicated when they should be simple," Tom said gently, lifting Nani into his arms with the practiced ease of 4 years of fatherhood. "But you don't need to worry about it. That's what parents are for." The word parents hung in the air, loaded with meaning and defiance. Tom met Letitia's eyes for the first time that morning, and she saw something there that gave her hope, determination, love, and the fierce protectiveness of a father defending his children. "I'll talk to him," Tom said quietly, his decision clearly made. "Man to man, find out what he's really after." "Tom, no, it's too dangerous." "Dangerous how?" "He's not going to attack me in broad daylight in front of our house." Tom set Nanny down gently, his movements careful and controlled. Sometimes the direct approach is the only one that works. Letitia watched from the window as Tom crossed the street, his steady gait projecting calm confidence despite the magnitude of what was at stake. Sergei got out of his car as Tom approached, and she could see them talking, their body language tense but not hostile. Two men whose lives had become entangled through their love for the same woman, facing each other with the future of 3 children hanging in the balance. "What are they saying?" Ava asked, climbing onto the window seat beside her mother, her analytical mind trying to solve the puzzle of adult conflict. "I don't know, sweetheart." But she could see the moment when Tom said something that made Sergei's shoulders sag in defeat. Could see when Sergei gestured toward the house, his face full of longing that was painful to witness. Could see Tom's response, firm but not unkind, and Sergei's slow nod of understanding. The conversation lasted perhaps 10 minutes, but it felt like hours. When Tom returned, his expression was grim but resolved, carrying the weight of whatever truths had been exchanged. "He's not going to drop the custody suit," he reported, his voice steady despite the devastating news, "but he's not doing this out of malice. He's doing it because he's desperate and believes those girls are the only legacy he'll ever have." "So what do we do?" Letitia asked, hating the helplessness in her own voice. "We fight," Sandra said immediately, her tone brooking no argument. "Emergency hearing or not, we present the strongest case possible for maintaining the status quo." "And if we lose?" Tom moved closer, not quite touching her, but close enough that she could feel his warmth, his solid presence that had anchored her for 4 years. "Then we appeal, and we keep fighting until we win." "Why?" The question slipped out before she could stop it, years of insecurity bubbling to the surface. "Why are you doing this?" "I lied to you, kept the truth from you for years." "Because they're my daughters," Tom said simply, his voice carrying absolute conviction. "Because you're my wife. Because families don't abandon each other, even when they're hurting." The words hit her like a physical force, love and guilt warring in her chest. This man who owed her nothing was risking everything for them. This man she had betrayed was standing between her children and destruction. 2 hours later, they sat in family court, the girls safely with James and his wife at their house across town. The courthouse felt like a battleground, with lawyers and clerks moving with military precision, processing the wreckage of human relationships with bureaucratic efficiency. Across the aisle, Sergei looked pale but determined, his legal team surrounding him like armor. His expensive suit couldn't hide the fact that he looked like a man who had aged years in the past few days. Beside him sat 2 empty chairs. Belinda was notably absent, a detail that didn't escape Sandra's attention. "Where's the supportive wife?" she murmured to Letitia, her eyes scanning the courtroom for threats and opportunities. The question was answered when Judge Patricia Chen called the court to order and immediately addressed an unusual situation. Her voice carried the authority of someone who had seen every variation of human drama, who dealt with the aftermath of broken relationships and damaged families every day. "Before we proceed with the matter at hand," Judge Chen announced, her tone suggesting she was not pleased with the developments in this case, "the court has received some disturbing information regarding threats made against the respondent. Mrs. Hanks, would you please approach the bench?" As Letitia stood on shaking legs, she saw Sergei's confused expression, his whispered conversation with his lawyers. Whatever was happening, he hadn't expected it. His legal team looked equally surprised, their careful preparation apparently inadequate for this development. "Your Honor," Sandra said, rising with documents in hand, "we have reason to believe that a third party has been attempting to manipulate these proceedings through intimidation and coercion." The next hour passed in a blur of legal maneuvering, presented evidence, and Sergei's growing shock as the truth about his wife's machinations came to light. The recording of Belinda's threats played in the silent courtroom, her calculated cruelty echoing off the walls like something from a nightmare. With each revelation, Sergei's face grew paler, his understanding of his situation shifting from confidence to horror. He had thought he was fighting for his children. He was discovering he had been manipulated into becoming a weapon against the family he had once destroyed. When it was over, when Judge Chen had dismissed the emergency petition pending a full investigation into Belinda's conduct, when Sergei's lawyers had retreated in confusion and barely concealed anger at being used, Letitia found herself face to face with her ex-husband in the courthouse hallway. "I didn't know," he said quietly, his voice hollow with shock and shame. "About Belinda, about the threats. I never would have—" "I know," she replied, surprised by her own certainty. Looking at him now, broken and humiliated, she could see past her fear to the man underneath. "You were many things, Sergei, but you were never cruel to children." He nodded gratefully, then looked past her to where Tom stood waiting, still maintaining that careful distance, but clearly prepared to defend his family against any threat. "He's a good man," Sergei said simply. "The best." "And the girls? They're happy?" "Very happy." Sergei was quiet for a long moment, his gaze distant as he processed the ruins of his carefully constructed life. "I've lost everything, haven't I? My wife, my child that isn't mine, any chance of being part of their lives." "You've lost the lies," Letitia corrected gently, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time. "Maybe now you can find something real." As they prepared to leave, as the courthouse began to empty of the day's damage and drama, Sergei's voice stopped them one final time. "Mr. Hanks." Tom turned back, his expression wary but not hostile. "Take care of them. All of them. They deserve someone who will love them without conditions." Tom's response was quiet, but carried clearly in the courthouse corridor, his words a promise and a vow. "I always have. I always will." But as they walked out into the afternoon sunlight, free to go home to their daughters, none of them noticed the figure watching from a black sedan across the street. Belinda Ashworth, her face twisted with fury, her phone pressed to her ear as she made arrangements that would turn their victory into something far more dangerous. Chapter 10. Love's Ultimate Victory. The courthouse steps felt like the summit of a mountain Letitia never thought she could climb. Warm September sunlight bathed the marble columns in gold, and for the first time in days, she could breathe without feeling like her chest was caught in a vice. Tom walked beside her, not quite touching but close enough that their hands occasionally brushed, small moments of contact that felt like promises being rebuilt. Behind them, the courthouse doors swung shut on the most harrowing 3 hours of Letitia's life. The emergency family court session had felt like a trial by fire, each testimony revealing another layer of deception that had nearly destroyed 2 families. She could still hear the echo of Judge Chen's voice as she dismissed all custody claims, could still see the shock on Sergei's face as the truth about his condition and his wife's betrayal unfolded in devastating detail. "It's over," Sandra Wu said, tucking legal documents into her briefcase with the satisfaction of a general whose strategy had prevailed. "The emergency petition is dismissed, the custody challenge is withdrawn, and Mr. Bulmer has agreed to relinquish any future claims. Your family is safe." Family. The word settled around Letitia's shoulders like a warm coat after years in the cold. Through the glass doors behind them, she could see courthouse staff cleaning up the emotional debris of their hearing, tissues discarded by spectators, legal pads filled with notes about a drama that would be forgotten by most, but would forever change the lives of everyone involved. "Thank you," Tom said quietly, shaking Sandra's hand. "For everything. I know this wasn't easy." "That's what we do," Sandra replied with a smile. We fight for families, and yours is worth fighting for." Behind them, through the courthouse doors, Sergei emerged with his considerably diminished legal team. His expensive suit couldn't hide the fact that he looked like a man who had aged a decade in a single afternoon. His face bore the hollow expression of someone who had gambled everything and lost. But when his eyes met Letitia's, she saw something unexpected: relief. "Letitia." His voice was rough with exhaustion and emotion. "I owe you an apology. For today, for 7 years ago, for everything in between." She studied his face, noting the new lines around his eyes, the way defeat had carved itself into his features. This wasn't the commanding man who had once dominated her world. This was someone smaller, more human, finally capable of admitting his mistakes. The man who had convinced her she was broken now stood before her, revealed as the broken one himself. "Sergei, please, let me say this." He took a shaky breath, glancing around at the people passing by, lawyers, families, ordinary citizens going about their business while his world crumbled. "I spent our entire marriage trying to control you, trying to make you into someone I thought I needed instead of loving who you were. I blamed you for our problems because accepting the truth about myself was unthinkable." Tom moved slightly closer to Letitia, not possessive but protective, his presence a steady reminder of what real love looked like. She felt his warmth, his solid reality, grounding her as Sergei continued his confession. "When I saw your daughters today, our daughters, when I watched them in that courtroom so bright and confident and loved, I realized what I'd really lost. Not the children I never had, but the woman who would have loved me through anything if I'd just been brave enough to let her." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with 7 years of might-have-beens. Letitia thought of the woman she had been during their marriage, eager to please, desperate for approval, willing to accept blame for problems that weren't hers. That woman was gone, replaced by someone stronger, someone who knew her worth. "They're not our daughters," Letitia said gently but firmly. "Biologically, yes. But they're Tom's daughters in every way that matters. They're the children of a man who shows up every day, who reads bedtime stories and builds blanket forts, and loves without keeping score." Sergei's gaze shifted to Tom, and something passed between the two men, not friendship, but understanding. Two men who had loved the same woman, but only one who had done it right. "How do you do it?" Sergei asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Love them so completely when they're not—" "When they're not what?" Tom interrupted, his voice quiet but strong. "When they're not perfect. When they come with complications. When they need someone to choose them every single day." He paused, his eyes finding Letitia's. "That's not a burden, Mr. Bulmer. That's the definition of family." The words hung in the afternoon air, simple and profound. Letitia felt tears threatening as she realized what Tom was really saying, that he chose her, chose all of them, not despite their complicated history, but because love was a decision you made every single day, especially when it was difficult. "The baby Belinda's carrying," Sergei said suddenly, his voice breaking slightly. "It's not mine, is it?" "No," Letitia replied softly. "I'm sorry." He nodded slowly, unsurprised. "I think I knew. Deep down, I think I always knew. I just wanted so desperately to believe I could have what you have now. Real love, real family, real happiness." "You can," Tom said unexpectedly, surprising them both. "Just not the way you've been trying to get it. Family isn't something you acquire or control. It's something you build day by day, with patience and honesty, and showing up even when it's hard." The wisdom in Tom's words seemed to settle over Sergei like a revelation. Here was a man who had raised 3 children who weren't biologically his, who had loved a woman scarred by another man's cruelty, who had built a family from the pieces of broken dreams, and he had done it all through simple, daily acts of love. As if summoned by the mention of showing up, the sound of running feet echoed across the courthouse plaza. Letitia turned to see James approaching with three small figures racing ahead of him: Ava, Nani, and Naomi, their faces bright with relief and joy. They had spent the morning with their uncle, playing in his backyard, while their future was decided in a sterile courtroom, blissfully unaware of how close they had come to losing everything. "Daddy!" Naomi launched herself into Tom's arms with the complete trust of a child who had never doubted she was loved. "Uncle James said the mean lawyers went away." "They did, sweetheart." Tom lifted her up, his face transformed by the smile that always appeared when his daughters were near. The sight of him holding her, his strong arms protective and sure, reminded Letitia of all the moments like this, the countless small acts of fatherhood that had made him their real father long before any court could declare it. "They're all gone now." Ava approached more cautiously, her intelligent eyes taking in the scene before her. She had always been the most perceptive of the three, the one who sensed adult emotions, even when she couldn't understand them. She looked at Sergei with the frank curiosity of childhood, studying his face with scientific interest. "You're the man from Mama's picture," she said matter-of-factly, her small voice carrying clearly in the courthouse plaza. "Yes," Sergei replied, kneeling down to her level despite his expensive suit. "I am." "Are you still making Mama sad?" The question was so direct, so innocent, that it hit like a physical blow. Sergei's face crumpled slightly as he looked at this small person who shared his features but possessed none of his complications. In her dark eyes, his eyes, he saw a clarity he had never achieved in 45 years of life. "I hope not," he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm trying very hard not to make anyone sad anymore." Nani hung back near Letitia, her perceptive nature clearly picking up on the emotional undercurrents. She had always been the most sensitive of the triplets, the one who felt everything deeply, even when she couldn't articulate it. But it was her quiet voice that provided the moment's grace note. "Sad people can become happy people," she said with 3-year-old wisdom. "Sometimes they just need time to learn how." Sergei looked up at Letitia, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "She's right, isn't she? About learning how to be happy." "She usually is," Letitia said softly, her hand finding Nani's silky hair. "The question is whether you're ready to do the work." "I think I have to be," Sergei replied, standing slowly. "I've lost everything else. My marriage, my reputation, the child I thought was mine. Maybe it's time to stop lying to myself and start building something real." As they prepared to leave, as James gathered the girls and Sandra finished her phone calls to ensure all legal paperwork was properly filed, Sergei approached Tom one final time. The two men faced each other in the golden afternoon light, their shared connection to Letitia and the girls creating an unlikely moment of understanding. "I want to say something," Sergei began, his voice formal but sincere. "Those children, they have your eyes now. Not the color, but the light in them. The security, the joy, the absolute certainty that they're loved. I never gave that to anyone, not even myself." Tom was quiet for a moment, considering his response. Around them, the courthouse plaza buzzed with ordinary life, people coming and going, dealing with divorces and custody arrangements and all the messy complications of human relationships. But in their small circle, something profound was happening. "It's not too late to learn," Tom said finally. "Isn't it? I'm 45 years old. My marriage is over. I have no real family, no legacy worth leaving." "Legacy isn't about what you leave behind," Tom interrupted gently. "It's about what you do with the time you have left. Those girls will always carry a piece of you, whether you're in their lives or not. The question is, what kind of piece you want that to be." The words seemed to hit Sergei with the force of revelation. He looked at the triplets, chattering excitedly as they prepared to go home, and for the first time his expression wasn't one of loss, but of hope. "Maybe," he said quietly, "I could send them birthday cards. Nothing intrusive, nothing that would confuse them, just acknowledgement that they exist, that they're precious." Tom and Letitia exchanged a look, a whole conversation passing between them in seconds. They had won the legal battle, secured their family's future. This small concession felt like grace, a way for Sergei to have some connection to his biological children without disrupting the life they had built. "I think that would be all right," Letitia said carefully, "as long as it stays simple. As long as you understand that Tom is their father." "I understand," Sergei said. "I understand more than I ever have before." As they walked to their cars, the girls chattering excitedly about going home, Letitia felt Tom's hand find hers, his fingers intertwined with hers carefully, questioningly, and when she squeezed back, she felt some essential tension release from his shoulders. "Are we okay?" she asked quietly as they buckled the girls into their car seats, the mundane act feeling miraculous after the day they'd had. "We're going to be," he replied, his voice carrying the certainty she had been desperate to hear. "It's going to take time, and we have things to work through. But Letitia, I never stopped loving you. I never stopped choosing you. Even when I gave you every reason to walk away. Especially then." He closed Naomi's door gently and turned to face her fully, his hands framing her face with infinite tenderness. "That's what marriage means, choosing each other through the difficult times, not just the easy ones." As they drove home through the familiar streets of their neighborhood, the girls singing off-key songs in the back seat, Letitia felt something she hadn't experienced in years: complete peace. The secrets were out, the battles were over, and her family was whole. The evening light painted everything in shades of gold and possibility, and for the first time since the invitation had arrived, she could imagine a future free from the shadows of the past. "Daddy," Ava said from her car seat as they pulled into their driveway, the sight of their home, their real home, washing over them like a blessing. "Are we safe now?" Tom looked at Letitia in the rearview mirror, and in his eyes she saw the reflection of everything they had built together, imperfect but real, complicated but true, tested by fire and proven unbreakable. "Forever, sweetheart," he said, his voice steady with absolute conviction. "We're safe forever." And as they walked into their house together, Tom carrying Naomi on his shoulders, while Ava and Nani raced ahead to tell their toys about their adventure, Letitia realized that sometimes the greatest love stories weren't about finding perfect people. They were about finding people willing to choose love every single day, even when the world tried to tear them apart. Behind them, the courthouse grew small in the distance, taking with it the last shadows of a past that no longer had the power to hurt them. Ahead, their home waited, imperfect, joyful, and filled with the sound of children who knew, beyond any doubt, that they were loved completely and unconditionally. The truth had finally set them all free.